morning. It's going to be interactive, so Cory's going to lead us in a good class, and then we'll break about 10:45 for the worship service at 11. Cory? Yeah, it's here. I just don't have it on.
Good morning. How is everybody? Tanya and I are so excited to be with you here at Yellowstone Bible Camp, and we're here not just because I've been invited to speak, and I'm so grateful for that, but we're here because of you. We love the fellowship, and we're strengthened and encouraged every time we have the opportunity to be part of this beautiful environment with precious people of God. Isn't it a joy? Aren't we thankful to be Christians and to know God's blessings and God's promises and God's goodness to us? If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Those words in Matthew 5:41 must have shocked the crowd to whom Jesus spoke in the Sermon on the Mount. It's right there along with other statements like if someone takes your tunic, give him your cloak too. If a person hates you, love him. If he curses you, pray for him. If it's your enemy, care for him. Speak to those that won't greet you. And if someone borrows from you, don't expect it back. There are things that Jesus taught that seem so counter to our natural way of thinking. And yet we know His Word is true because when we put those ideas into practice, we find they're powerful, they're spiritual, they're heavenly. We're going to talk this morning about this principle of the second mile. How do we turn our have-tos into want-tos? Those two phrases, I've got to and I get to, sound almost alike, and yet they're as different as day and night. How do we go from one to the other? The story is told that early one weekday morning, Johnny's mother called down the hall and said, "Johnny, it's time to get up, get ready for school." Johnny said, "I'm not going today." She said, "Why not?" He said, "Well, the kids tease me, the teachers don't like me, I'd rather stay in bed." "Why should I go?" And the mother said, "Well, 3 reasons. Number 1, they're all expecting you. Number 2, you're 42 years old. And number 3, you are the principal." Do you ever feel that way? Whether it's your work, it may be even your time in the Word and prayer and your involvement, sharing your faith with other people. There are certain things that you know you ought to do, you must do, and sometimes the excitement, the thrill, the motivation is not just what you want it to be. Several years ago, we lived in Florence, Alabama, worshiping with Richard and Dawn Downey, our dear friends. Appreciate them so much. I was driving on the road to the church building, and I saw a man in his late 80s. You may have heard of Joe the plumber. Call this guy Joe the picker-upper. He's out there collecting litter on his street. He's dressed in orange. He has this tool, a big smile, grinning ear to ear. He's delighted. He's been doing it year after year after year. Who knows how long, and yet he's limited by his arthritis. And I see him out there with his bag and his stick, and I think, you know, here's a man that's doing what he wants to do because he loves it. He has a thrill. He feels a zeal. I want to be like that in my walk with Jesus Christ. Don't you? I don't want a have-to dominate me. I want the love of God and the grace of God, the power of God to move me forward every day. Well, guess what I found in my suitcase when I unpacked it here after we arrived? Well, we had flown from Dallas-Fort Worth to Salt Lake City, and then we rented a car and drove up through Utah and Idaho and a little bit into Yellowstone and up this way. And I thought, I'm going to talk about the second mile. I could talk about how much we enjoyed each part of that trip. When I opened my bag, this is not the first time it's happened, I had a lovely card from the Transportation Security Administration. You ever get one of these? I love cards from the federal government, don't you? They've inspected my bag. Well, I hope as they opened it, they saw my Yellowstone Bible Camp hooded sweatshirt. And the blanket that my sister-in-law in Middle Tennessee made with love that we were thankful to have here last night. I hope as he went through looking for suspicious material and realized there was none, that was a good thing for him. And I wonder, did he do his job with a smile? Was he happy about it? Or, gotta go to work, gotta put in the clock, he was working for a check. And then I thought, I know what I'm going to do on the way back home because they always inspect my bag. I look suspicious. My luggage dangerous. It's heavy. It has yellow ribbons on it so I can spot it at the claim area. I may put this card back in my bag and write, "Thank you for checking my stuff." I may even include some cookies. Wouldn't that be nice? I think that would be a great way to go. I want to ask you to be thinking about some things as we interact this morning that have to do with this principle of going the second mile. You may think about a character in the Bible that did more than what was expected, that didn't stop at the limit of expectation, but continued. I may ask you, what are the benefits of being a second miler, and why do we think in those terms, and why doesn't everybody live in a way that goes farther than what's demanded, that does more than what's required? Why isn't every student in school one that turns in their work early and doesn't settle for the minimum, but gives in addition to what has been assigned? Why doesn't every person at work go with a positive attitude and stay longer and accomplish more than the boss requires? Why doesn't every husband, every wife say, in our marriage, in our life, I'm going to surprise my spouse. I'm going to do something so loving, so unselfish, so kind, so thoughtful, and I'm going to enjoy that experience of going the second mile. Do you have a character you think of in Scripture that exhibited that principle that you'd like to mention to us? Barnabas. He's one of the first ones. If you're taking notes, the end of Acts 4 and the beginning of Acts 5. You have people in the Jerusalem church, this is verses 32 to 37 of Acts 4. They're selling their property. They're giving the proceeds. It's being distributed among the needy saints who are losing their jobs, who don't have enough food to eat. And an example of that is this man whose real name is not Barnabas. What's his real name? Joseph. He's a Levite from Cyprus. Barnabas is his nickname, which means son of encouragement. And you'll find in Acts 13, 1-3, when the Spirit of God called upon the missionaries to leave Antioch, the Spirit said, "Set apart for me Barnabas and Saul." Called him by his nickname. He gained that because he was always exhorting. He was always uplifting. He was always giving a helping hand. He took Saul of Tarsus under his wing in Acts 9 when everyone else was afraid of this new convert, former persecutor of the church, and did so much more. Acts 5, you have Ananias and Sapphira, right? I think there's a contrast, giving at its best and its worst. You have these two. Peter said, "You've lied not just to man, but to the Holy Spirit. You've lied to God," and they both lost their lives, apparently trying to receive more credit for doing something that was beyond what they actually did. Were they 1-milers? Were they less than 1 mile? I'm going to do this and people are going to think I'm somebody. Is that what's going on? And Barnabas, just out of the joy, out of the desire, out of the willingness. Great example. Who else do you think of? I'll tell you one of my favorites. Genesis 29:20. Jacob. What did he do in order to get his wife? Worked for how long? 7 years. How'd the deal work out? Not well. There was a switch. Leah. You know what's interesting? In Hebrew, there's a verb, shakav, that means to lie down or have relations with. And the way we learned that word and its meaning was our teacher said that when Jacob woke up with Leah, he got the shuck off his life. That has stayed with me ever since. So then what does he do for Rachel? 7 years. He gets to have her right away, but then works 7 more. Do you know Genesis 29:20 says what? That time seemed but a few days to him because of his love for her. Wow! Is that the way marriage can be? Is that the way life and family and relationships in the Lord can be? Not drudgery, not when will this be finished? When can I get past this obligation and do something that I really like to do, but I'm going to do this and then some. Now, do you think of, yes?
The Good Samaritan.
The Good Samaritan is another one. Luke chapter 10, 25 to 37. Which of these three was a neighbor to the man that fell among thieves? Well, the priest and the Levite passed by, and then the Samaritan, who would have been a natural enemy of this Jewish man that was beaten up by thieves and left to die, he stops. And the Bible says, as Jesus told the story, he was moved with compassion. That's what leads to the second mile. And so he gave him his animal, he gave him his supplies, his medicinal care, put him up in the lodge. I'm reminded of a Bible school teacher that was talking to the children about this passage and said, now, if you passed someone who was hurting and in need, what would you do? A little girl spoke up and said, I'd pass by on the other side. Teacher said, you would. Why would you do that? Because I know that eventually a Good Samaritan will come. You know, that's the way it is. We think somebody is going to step in and help with this ministry, this activity, respond to this challenge. And that Jewish, quote, expert in the law in Luke 10, when Jesus said which of the three was a neighbor to the one that fell among thieves, he had to say it was the one who had mercy on him. And he showed us that being a neighbor is a proactive decision in advance to find someone that we can help, and that way we become their neighbor. You know, the Jews, when they heard love your neighbor, they added the flip side, hate your enemy. And Jesus said that's not the way it is. And he explained that that kind of love for other people grows out of the first commandment. Love God with all your heart, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor, which is everybody, as you love yourself. And all the other commandments hang upon these two. And that's the fuel for going the second mile. Anybody else you think of?
How about Zacchaeus?
Zacchaeus. He went the extra, what? Extra ladder step? The extra few feet? You know, so what's interesting is that chief tax collector in Luke 19, he was looking for Jesus, and Jesus was looking for him. Isn't that interesting? What if he hadn't gone up in the tree? What if he'd just been part of the crowd, short in stature and unable to see over people's heads? Jesus going to his house, and what does he say? Well, he's going to make things right if he's defrauded anybody. He's going to give much of what he has to care for the poor. And Jesus said, today salvation has come to this house. Good. You think of another one.
Members of the churches of Macedonia?
Yes. 2 Corinthians 8, the members of the church in Macedonia. Let me tell you what they did, Paul said. They gave beyond their ability. Out of their affliction and their distress, look at their wealth of liberality. And he says, verses 3 and 4, they first gave themselves to the Lord and to us by the will of God. I think of Epaphroditus. We don't hear his name much, but if you turn to Philippians chapter 2, here's one that came from Philippi to Rome when Paul was in prison and brought this gift for which the apostle is writing his thanks. He risked his life to complete what was lacking in their service. Epaphroditus, we imagine, could have stayed home. They might have asked for volunteers, and he stepped back. After he had all these responsibilities and things to take care of, perhaps. But he goes and he searches out and he finds Paul and he gives him this gift. And then in chapter 4 of Philippians, Paul says, I've received this. It's a sweet-smelling aroma. What you've sent through him is really a sacrifice, an offering to God. And I'm grateful for it. Timothy was like that also in Philippians chapter 2. Paul said, I have no one else like him. Of a kindred mind. Same way of thinking. Same purpose and attitude toward life. Oh, you might think of, yes?
The woman who anointed Jesus before his death.
Good. The woman who anointed Jesus before his death. You might think of John chapter 12. As things are getting ready for the crucifixion of Jesus. And she has this ointment. It's precious. She can only pour it out one time for one person, and the fragrance fills the house. There's a message for us there, too. And she did it because she wanted to. No coercion, nobody pushing her. Yes?
I was going to say, I suppose it's the obvious answer, but Jesus himself gave us the greatest examples of compassion and mercy and love toward all. And
Yes.
he certainly went more than the second.
Jesus is the greatest of all. He goes and he goes and he goes. And let's go ahead and jot down, if we like. You know, the Gospels note in Mark 15:41 that Simon of Cyrene did what? Carried the cross. And actually, Matthew, Mark, and Luke all refer to Simon of Cyrene carrying the cross. John tells us that Jesus carried the cross. The Bible never actually says that Jesus fell beneath the weight of the cross. That is someone's possible suggestion as how both men carried. The Bible doesn't actually specify that. It's possible that Simon assisted Jesus in the carrying of the cross. All we know is that Jesus carried it and Simon carried it. But what a world of difference. You know, we started with Matthew 5:41, where Jesus said, if anyone compels you to go 1 mile, there's only one other place in all the New Testament that that word appears that's translated compelled. It's used in Matthew 5:41, if anyone compels you to go 1 mile, and it's used in the references of Simon of Cyrene. Why did he carry the cross? He was compelled. He was coming in from the country. There was this task to be taken care of. And they forced him into it. Jesus, contrast is clear, out of love, devotion, interest in us. For those reasons, he carried the cross. The word rendered compelled is a loan word from actually Persia. It had to do with couriers who were made to take the mail from one spot to another. And it was required of some of them to accomplish that whether they wanted to or not. Jesus said to us in Luke 9:23, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross every day and follow me. So that's what I'm to do. Take up the cross. Am I going to be a Simon of Cyrene? No. I want to be like Jesus. And I want to carry the cross because it's not just a have to. It is a have to, but it's a want to. It's not just I've got to. It's I get to. Now, would you suggest one difference between a 1 miler who says, I'm going to do what I have to do, here's the stake in the road, I'm dropping the pack and going off my way. The 1 miler that does just enough to get by, and the 2nd miler that says, hey, I've done what was expected, this next mile is my mile. Not his mile, it's my mile. It's not the frown mile, it's the smile mile. What's one difference in thinking between the 1 miler and the 2nd miler? Anybody have a suggestion? Yes?
Being glad to serve.
Glad to serve. Good. The one feels pressed, forced, coerced, and the other says, hey, this is an opportunity. You know, it makes me think of Colossians 3:23. Whatever work you do, do it heartily, as for the Lord and not for men. It's from Him you'll receive the reward. Don't do it because the boss's eye is on you. Don't do it just for a paycheck, just to get to the weekend. But instead because you have the privilege of serving. And you know, Jesus said, whatever you do for the least of these, what? So how do you serve Jesus? You serve Him by serving other people, whether it's here at camp or in the church or in the home. Good. Glad to serve. That's the 2nd miler. What else? Difference between the 1 miler and the 2nd miler. Yes.
It glorifies God.
Good. The second miler is glorifying God. He has a bigger purpose. You know, you think about it. In Jesus' time, a Roman soldier could apparently just tap a Jewish male on the shoulder and say, "Carry my pack." And he would then have to load it up. And they had mile markers, as we do on the highways today. They say all roads lead to Rome. That's where the 0 mile marker is, and then they're counted in those days, in many cases, from there. And you think about that Jewish man, how irritated, how resentful, how angry he could be walking that mile. And he speaks out against the occupation of the invading forces, the taxation, the unfairness, how unjust it is. And he's just building up this bitterness and this acid and this, oh, if I could get even with, I can't wait for you people to leave our land, get out of here and be gone. And then you can almost feel he might reach that stopping point. Here's the line. Boom. And then he goes home and his wife sees him and he's scowling. He's rude. He's short-tempered. He doesn't have time for her. He's just so consumed. Someone said it's like drinking acid hoping the other person will fall down dead. That's what he's been doing. His kids, he can't hold them. He can't be warm. He can't play with them. And they tell each other, "Daddy's in a bad mood again today." And he's let that Roman officer ruin his spirit, his heart, his relationships. Now, on the other hand, what if he thinks, like Stephen was saying, I'm doing this to the glory of God? So he walks that first mile standing tall with a positive, confident stride. And if he has the occasion to talk to the enemy Roman, he said, "Let me tell you about our God, about our history, about our heritage, about how blessed we have been because of Him." And what if he were even to ask that Roman, "Tell me about your homeland and what your experience has been in your life?" What if he sees this as a mission, something of a providential divine appointment? And then they reach that line, and the Roman is expecting the Jew to throw down the pack like everybody does and go off mad. Instead he said, "Hey, listen, I could go." And then the Roman says, "What makes this guy different? What is it about him? I haven't seen this before." And he keeps saying, "Well, it's because I know the Lord. And I'm walking with Him. And I want to do something today for you that shows how much He means to me." And then that Jewish man goes home to his wife and he's smiling. And what does she say to him? Perhaps something like, "You've been listening to that Jesus again, haven't you? You've done something today. What is it?" "Well, I was walking with this Roman." "Well, didn't you yell at him? Didn't you turn your back on him?" "No. I served the Lord." "Well, for 1 mile, right?" "No. I went another mile." Kids come. This rubs off on the sons and daughters, doesn't it? You know, one thing I would like to emphasize is that when you have a second miler, married to a second miler, there's an environment in the home that will produce second milers. If it's mom and dad are 1 milers, they're bickering, they're arguing about who's doing more and who dropped the ball on this or that. What do the kids learn as they grow and develop? The same perspective. And so this man that did something for a Roman that he didn't have to do, that attitude may have transformed everything in his life. I want you to think about the student in school or in homeschool that goes beyond, that does work early, that does more than what is required. And then when the opportunity comes for a student to be recommended for a scholarship or a special project or activity, this is the one that you automatically think of because they give, we'd say, 110% everything they do. Then they go perhaps to college or university, and that same spirit, next thing you know, they have leadership and influence among their peers. Their professors notice them. They stand out because they're so different from the norm. And when it comes to jobs and open doors, privileges, benefits, one cannot estimate how what we do to glorify God, not for ourselves, not for our own advancement, God can use to put us in places and use us in ways that continue to glorify Him. Very good. Another difference between 1 milers and 2nd milers. Oh, yes?
I think, well, you partly covered it, but I think the quality of work.
Good. The quality of work. The fact that this person invests in whatever it is at hand. It's not just something to be checked off of a list, but it's something to be made and done the very best we can, because it represents our God and it shows people who He is through our behavior. Good, so the quality. And I think you can see in our own world when there is an emphasis on God and on the Bible and how it affects work. Quality increases. So does scholastic achievement. So do so many areas of social and cultural life. And where this is minimized or reduced, you see people trying to get to the weekend and trying to do less than what perhaps they have to do or what they would have done. Very good. The quality shines. Another difference. Yes?
I keep thinking about the person who is willing to do
Yes.
what others won't do.
Good. The person who is willing to do what others won't do. I learned of a book sometime back that had to do with a person that thought that very same way. He said, you know, I realized there are all these things out there to be done that maybe I'm not qualified to do. But there's a host of things that anybody can do. He said, I decided I would do those things. I'd find the things that, yeah, I could do that, but a lot of other people could. But who's doing it? So I'll do that. So a willingness, I'd be glad to, or here am I, send me, in Isaiah chapter 6. An eagerness, availability, accessibility. That's the 2nd mile. Good. Another. Yes?
You kind of hinted at this, but they have the mindset that this world is not their home.
Good. This world is not our home. You know, after the 2nd mile, there's another mile coming. There's a mile that goes on and on and on. And I'm on the path. I'm part of a journey that's leading me home. And I believe that if I live this 2nd mile philosophy, I'll be more prepared for that place. I will long for that place. Do you think that 2nd milers might have an added ability to draw others to Christ? Because that spirit and that energy, the impact is tremendous. And if people live in a mindset of the 1 mile, and they see someone who thinks and acts and walks and talks like this, it can be a stark contrast. It can be a powerful draw. And people begin to wonder, what makes you and me different from themselves? Now, I want you to think about everyday ways that you and I can be 2nd milers at home. I remember asking this to a group. I said, what's the difference between a marriage of 2 milers and a marriage of 1 milers? And one man spoke up, and I thought he said, ice on the beers. I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. I was sure maybe I hadn't heard him correctly. I said, would you say that again? I thought he said the 2nd time, ice on the beers. I zeroed in like this, and what he was trying to tell me was, icing on the beaters. That when his wife made a cake at home, she gave her husband the beaters and let him lick the icing. I thought, when I was a boy, my mom, I always wanted to be first in the kitchen because I had 2 older brothers. And if I could be there when the beaters were ready, you know, that's exactly right. Maybe those little things that show kindness, thoughtfulness, generosity, that instead of you saying to your spouse, why didn't you take care of that? You say, I'm going to take care of that. Wait till your spouse finds out that something that might have been their responsibility, you've already handled it. It's being willing to listen. It's offering to serve. It's looking for the needs that your husband or wife has. You know, the person that married you did so with the anticipation that the various things related to marriage and companionship would basically be satisfied in your relationship. There are things that only God can do for us. No other human being can do that. But within marriage, it's not good for man to be alone, God says. And so it is. I remember one author said that some people, when they get married, they're like a tick looking for a dog. Oh, I don't know about that. They're thinking, this person is going to serve me, wait on me, supply me, you know, I'm going to have all I could ever want. Oh, what a false view that is. And then he went on to say, the problem with some marriages is that you have 2 ticks and no dog. That can happen, can't it? So in the second miler marriage, there's a spirit of saying, how can I be the best husband or wife that you could have ever married? How can it be? What can I do today so that when the day is over, you'll be glad you married me instead of, oh, what's his name, right? Right? What can I do today so that our marriage will move forward and our children will be blessed and they will see the benefit of living the second mile and they'll want to be the very same way? Anything else you think about the benefits of being a second miler? Yes?
You know, you look back to Joshua and Caleb of the 12 spies. Caleb was an old man.
Yes.
When he went in to conquer that land, when he volunteered
Yes.
to do that second mile, and look what he did for the nation. You know, took him into the promised land. And I think
Yes.
that in our lives, we can do that for God. If we're that second miler, we can help others and take them with us. And the joy is just beyond that.
Yeah, think of the leadership Garth's talking about, that Caleb already up in years, he's one of the spies, faithful along with Joshua, and then years later he's going into the promised land. And think of the influence with all that he's been through. Yes, Bill?
I think about Aquila and Priscilla in Acts 18, a teen ministry.
Good.
What a great marriage that must have been.
Aquila and Priscilla, a team ministry. You know, the strongest glue that a husband and wife can have is in serving the Lord together. We've always said the family that prays together stays together. The couple that serves, worships, gives, lives, loves as a team, shares the gospel with others as Aquila and Priscilla did. How tremendous that is. I'll close our class time with these words from an unknown author. I woke up today excited over all I get to do before the clock strikes midnight. I have responsibilities to fulfill today. My job is to choose what kind of day I'm going to have. Today I can complain because the weather is rainy, or I can be thankful that the grass is being watered for free. Today I can feel sad that I don't have more money, or I can be glad that I plan my purchases wisely and avoid waste. Today I can grumble about my health, or I can rejoice that I am alive. Today I can lament over all that my parents didn't give me when I was growing up, or I can feel grateful that they allowed me to be born. Today I can cry because roses have thorns, or I can celebrate the fact that thorns have roses. Today I can mourn my lack of enough friends, or I can excitedly embark upon a quest to discover new relationships. Today I can wail because I have to go to work, or I can shout for joy because I have a job. I can complain because I have to go to school, or I can eagerly open my mind and improve myself. Today I can murmur dejectedly because I have to work at home, or I can feel happy that I get to work at home and have a home. Today stretches ahead of me, waiting to be shaped. And here I am, the sculptor who with God's help gets to do the shaping. What today will be like is up to me. I get to choose what kind of day I will have. Thank you for taking part in this beginning Bible class section.